We will move past the idea of race at some point, but there will always be people against it.
It works as a concept. And I also think about Frantz Fanon, who says you have to create a new humanism in order to overcome race.
Since the beginning of everything, it has always been about people of color.
If we see the argument and say we can't do that, we're giving power to those who constructed it in the first place. Yes. To say that they bound us to something that's going to be with us for all time.
This is Fresh Perspectives, a show where we get new perspectives on the social issues that affect modern society. Our contributors will play a game where they pick out a statement. If they agree, they will walk to the agree side and state their reasons why. If they disagree, they will walk to the disagree side and state the reasons why. This is all in order to unify across the different perspectives.
When we talk about race, it's only people of color.
I think our conversation could be better. I think we've infantilized people of color a lot and made them out to be people who are perennially incapable of happiness or kind of autonomous. It's only recently where people of color have really got a hold of the conversation. I think we've seen great people throughout history who have contributed, but now I think there's more diversity in the conversation. And now also people are talking about both sides more.
Whiteness is also a race, and whiteness maintains white supremacy. When you think about this relation between black and white, it's problematic because we are here because we are all racialized in a sense. When people talk about it's only about color, it isn't, you know, it shouldn't be.
The angle of the white supremacy has never truly been a subject of racism before.
News, social media, whatever, like just going out, talking to your friend, that's the only subject, white, black people. If we say that there's an act of racism, directly that should be black person is being like discriminated or a white person is doing something. Like we shouldn't be only discussing color. There's much more to race than being of a color.
It has always been about people of color. I feel like they are the people who truly suffered from everything related to racism and to different races.
If there's the African World Cup, there would be a lot of judgments. There would be a lot of arguments. Algeria, Morocco, and Tunisia would be directly discriminated by other countries because we're considered as the white people of Africa. So you see how even the conversation is related to color here.
So you're saying basically in Africa, your cultural identity hasn't always been recognized because of the fact you don't fall within a color group?
No, because like other African countries would call us like that. Where we go play games, there's always should be the African referee should always go against. We always like be harassed. There should always be a trauma after that. We should always feel like we're divided. Although we're from the same continent, we all fall into the same cause. Other African countries would feel like we're not eligible to be there. Shall we take another round?
Yeah.
Race is biological. Just imagine like a kid getting raised in a household where he literally knows anything about anything. It could be biological in the sense that like from the moment he opens his eyes in some house and he will get like those ideas from his parents. So it's like, it's all about like the way that kid is getting raised.
Your argument is pointing in the contrary, you know. Race is kind of a construction, you know. All your argument point you towards the race is not biological, but it is a construction, a kind of construction, a social construction, right?
I believe it's constructed by the society, environment, the culture you're growing up in. Even within the family, I believe that the race is constructed. There shouldn't be the idea of race. There should be human beings circulating around with each other.
I've heard a lot of people, I think, like settle this kind of topic and say that race is a social construct, and there's also like a backstory, I think, of how race was socially constructed with a purpose. I think this occurred in America, but also in some colonies too. So if we see the argument and say we can't do that, we're giving power to those who constructed it in the first place.
Just to clarify one point, are we like talking about race or racism when we ask the question about whether it's biological or like constructed socially or culturally. I feel like we are talking about race here and not racism.
When we say a race is socially constructed, it seems like it's just discourses. It's just like, oh, if it is constructed, so we can deconstruct, but it's not like that. So I can agree with you when say race is biological in the sense that the sciences, the human sciences used race as a huge concept.
I kind of get what you're getting from it's getting biological. I guess the race in itself as a scientific concept, I'd agree that it's biological. But if we discuss the race as a concept, I disagree that it's biological. I feel like it's socially constructed.
Yeah, I think it depends on whether you see color as race.
Exactly.
So we might be discussing color and complexion, but I think a lot of time when people talk about race, they talk about the concept of, let's say, blackness or whiteness. They were talking about the color, but they were also talking about the social implications of the color. Get back at it?
Perfect.
We still love you, Houcine.
Okay, we have a statement. Race is perceived differently by this generation.
It's a yes and it's a no. I see a lot of youngsters, a lot of the new generation are more open to conversation, are more curious to know. They're not just swallowing what's being fed to them. They would think, they would like, you know, probably even traveling around, like, and talking to other people from different race. They're learning by that. I get it from a personal experience, me, myself. So when I came here, I automatically became tolerant and open to know who are these people. So different on many levels, but I'm still open to the conversation. But probably if I go back to the very beginning, I wasn't very open to it. I found it really, really intimidating being in Ireland.
I think this is something that, in terms of power balance, has given privilege to white and has ascribed disadvantage to black. And I think instead of trying to tamper that power balance, sometimes we fed into it. We're looking at history and we look at an example of, let's say, black people being discriminated against in South Africa. So the assumption is white people were superior, black people were inferior in South Africa, which was the case in practice. But now that we live in the 21st century, I think we're more able to challenge that power imbalance and see what we can do to equalize things and to ensure that everyone's on an equal playing field. Sometimes, instead of completely condemning the concept, we've condemned the plant of racism, but the fertile ground that allows for racism to emerge, we haven't condemned strongly enough, and sometimes we can feed into them. I think we haven't always done the best job to completely fight, but I do think we're far better relative to previous generations from my personal experience. So
I agree with him, so just...
As much as I really like the idea of this young generation being open about different races and different religions and cultures, but at the same time it's really sad to see there are some examples which do not really support this. There's a video on YouTube right now. It was by two Irish girls literally assaulting and insulting a guy from Mexico. I think he was a Latino guy, and they were talking to him about things like, what are you doing here in Ireland? You're not welcome. Go back to your country. A girl who is only 16, how and why would she talk about topics like this? I feel even this generation is somewhere in the middle.
This is interesting. There isn't racism in Ireland.
It is quite felt, and me being subject to those incidents made me going out on the streets. But although I like it, I like my friends here. I know there are a lot of good people, but it's still there in me. It's still I'm always oh, what if this happened? I'm just gonna stand up for myself. I always have the idea in the back of my mind that I should be prepared in any way.
Personally, I have never been a subject to racism, honestly. But unfortunately, I have two friends of mine and they are like both Muslims, they both come from the same country as I am. They were like assaulted, attacked by few guys. They were attacked and they took off their veil, or what we call hijab. And that was like really such a traumatizing situation for them. They really felt like traumatized by that act. And the problem is that like they did everything as should be, but still nothing has been done. Probably you really cannot catch young kids, but at the same time, it kind of supports what they do. Like they can do it and they can still run free.
I think it could be argued that anywhere we go as people, racism will follow to some extent. However, here in Ireland, to speak of the unique type of racism that manifests itself, sometimes it can be really aggressive, like in the case involving your friends. I've heard similar stories about people who are of African descent or different backgrounds, from Eastern Europe even, who have faced discrimination. There's like a gene in Ireland that has like really been pervading the country for a while, which makes a lot of people believe that here in Ireland we can't be racist because Ireland fought racism from the UK. A lot of people, I think, when they're told that there's racism in Ireland, they're like, oh, what, in Ireland? No way, not in Ireland. I think we can't challenge it unless we admit the fact that it can exist. Ireland has its own unique country, a cultural atmosphere, so we have to try and appreciate the nuances of Irish-specific racism and see how we can challenge it.
Here's a statement.
We can move past the idea of race.
We will move past the idea of race at some point, but there will always be people against it. There will all be an oppositional part towards that, who wouldn't accept it, who would find it very different.
The idea of moving past race is a very aspirational goal. I think when we separate them, we see race for what it is, and we're able to aspire towards something better. Yes. And we're able to also see how we always want to fill the tribalism gap.
Because you cannot see it all white, you cannot see it all black. There should be like a point, a spot of blackness or whiteness in both.
I'm in the middle as well because I can agree with both. I agree and disagree. I think in the future we can, move past the idea of race, but right now it works as a concept. And I also think about Frantz Fanon, who says you have to create a new humanism in order to overcome race. I agree with him, so yeah.